on episode 85 of the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast with Army head coach Kevin Ward.
You know, I look back at Coach Smith, and his attitude was just never, ever satisfied, ever. And it was just this relentless pursuit of knowing that you can be better and always being measured by the expectations of the program, which are to be the very best.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestled, because if you wrestled, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
You know, if I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Welcome back to Wrestling Changed My Life. This is your host, Ryan Warner. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great episode for you today, and it's with the Army head coach, Kevin Ward. Army is on a tear this year. They're 4-1. They beat Illinois. They won their own tournament, which Penn State was at. So there's a lot of momentum around the Army program, and I really enjoyed talking to Kevin about, one, what it was like wrestling for John Smith at Okie State, because Kevin was there when Okie State won 4 titles in a row. And then he built a program from scratch. He was the first head coach at Ouachita Baptist, which is a D2 program that he built into a national contender in his time there. And so he's kind of known as the coach's coach, right? He knows how to build programs. He knows how to fundraise, and I really enjoyed talking to him. Hope you do as well. Fan of the Week goes to Vince Alber. Vince was a state champion wrestler from Dakota and is the cousin of Josh Alber, who was on the show last week. Thank you for tuning in, Vince. We appreciate it. Last but not least, this episode is brought to you by... No sponsor today, folks. This one is brought to you by my extreme gratitude for all of you listening each and every week. The show has grown tremendously over the past 5 to 6 months, and I can't thank you enough for tuning in. It means the world to me. It really does. And that's it, folks. Let's give it up for the pride of Saudi Daisy High School, Kevin Ward. All right, we're here with Coach Kevin Ward. Coach, how are you this morning?
Man, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me.
It's my pleasure, man. You guys are off to a really hot start. Beat Illinois, where my home state, which is a nice Big Ten win for you guys, and had a pretty solid weekend at the Black Knight Open. What do you guys attribute some of the early success to this year?
Well, I think, certainly some of it looks like kind of an overnight success, but, in our eyes, it's anything but. It's I'm on my 6th season here, and we continue to work as hard now, as I did when it started. But I think what we're, starting to see is the results of just a lot of years of hard work from the coaching staff, from recruiting and coaching, and I think most importantly, the guys on the team. We have an incredible group of seniors. We have 13 seniors on our roster, and these are guys that, have stepped up, have chosen to believe that a certain level of success is possible here. They're putting in the work to back that up. And then obviously we've shown through competition that when it comes down to it in competition, our guys can step up and they can perform and they can wrestle with, pretty much anybody around the country. So it's not an easy question to answer. What do we attribute it to? I think it just goes, back to years of hard work and belief, and then being willing to back that up, through competition.
I love when people say something's an overnight success, because obviously that's never the case in anything. I refuse to believe that. Even LeBron, like when he was 15, he had been playing for like 10 years or so at that point. So you guys certainly believe that philosophy and have been putting in the work over the past 6 years to get to where you're at now.
Yeah, definitely. And the honest truth is it goes back way beyond that. These guys have been wrestling, most of them, since they're 5 or 6 years old. So they've been putting in, 15 years of work to get to this point, and then you work hard enough, for so many years, and all of a sudden you're an overnight success. But there's no question, it's the years of work that add up to make it possible.
And the kind of guys you're dealing with, these are a different breed of humans out there in the best possible way. These guys are ultra disciplined and have committed to going on to serve our country. How is that kind of dynamic change things when you're out there recruiting versus what some of the other D1 programs are experiencing?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it is interesting. What I've learned, the answer to that is, it doesn't change our recruiting all that much. We have high standards in recruiting, but we're looking for the same things every other program's looking for. We are looking for guys that can win in high school, that want to be NCAA champions in college. I guess, the thing that makes us more different is, we're looking for guys that have a strong focus on having a life outside of the sport and when the sport is done, like these guys, they love wrestling while they're here. It's just about the most important thing in their life. But I think they understand that although they will always call themselves a wrestler, you can't wrestle forever. And, they have a focus on developing outside of the sport so they can have a really bright future when their wrestling career comes to an end. With that in mind, winning is super important to us, and we want to win, and you can't win without people that are serious and committed to the sport of wrestling. So it starts with that, to be honest with you. We're not looking for guys that grew up just dreaming of being in the Army. We're looking for guys that want to win NCAA titles and want a future outside of the sport. And when we find them, we share with them, here's what West Point's really about, here's what life here is like, here's what our program is about. And if we do that well enough, then we can recruit well enough to compete.
And what is a day in the life like for these guys? Because I know you've been at one of the top programs in the country, Oklahoma State, so you know what that's like. But what's a day in the life like for one of your guys on the team now?
Sure. Yeah, it's what I call the championship lifestyle. And we get up in the morning, and we'll have a morning workout or a lift. Typically, that morning workout is either at 6:30 or 7 a.m., depending. Our guys start class at 8:40 in the morning. So whatever it takes us to get done with our workout in the mornings and have them fed and ready to go to class, we could start earlier. It just doesn't make sense. So 6:30 or 7, we'll work out, drill, wrestle, lift, whatever we're doing on that particular day in the morning. Our guys go to class, have lunch, around noon, and then they'll have maybe one or two more classes after that, and we'll practice in the afternoons at 3:30 or 4:30 p.m. After that, it's, you have dinner, do your homework, and rest and repeat. So the differences are, like from where I went to school at Oklahoma State, our guys, the academics are certainly very serious here. And the expectation of them for everybody that's around them, is really high. So their instructors and their professors expect a lot from them. Their peers expect a lot from them. Mm-hmm. So they're held to a very high standard, all day, every day. And that's what makes them different. It's not that, it's not that other people maybe couldn't do it. It's just these guys have chosen to be in an environment where they're held to high standards, and it's just a testament to being able to do whatever is required of you. Anybody can do it. You just have to be willing to be able to be held to that standard. The day-to-day life is, it's like I said, it's work out in the morning, go to school, work out again, rest and repeat, the championship lifestyle.
Man, and that kind of framework has to just be a bonus for your guys because it eliminates a lot of distractions for them in terms of the everyday college life. So that must be a real benefit for you as a coach, kind of looking at it that way.
You nailed it. It's I think what intimidates a lot of people about West Point is the perception of the discipline and the structure that's here, and but the reality of it is every high performing, high achieving individual operates under discipline and structure, and we all need it. Mm-hmm. The intimidating thing is having someone else provide that for you. But what our guys learn is that through discipline and through structure, you're able to bring out the most in yourself. because you don't have room for these other distractions that could pull you off course.
I have to.
So as a coach, it helps me know. I know when our guys leave the wrestling room, they're around really positive influences. I know they're around other people that want to do the right things. So my concerns about my guys when they leave the wrestling room, are maybe not the same as a lot of coaches around the country that have to worry what's going on outside of the wrestling room. I know what's going on with my guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to do a shameless plug for this this guy I listen to, Jocko Willnick, his podcast. It's called the Jocko Podcast, but he has this saying, and he's a former Navy SEAL, that discipline equals freedom. And you kind of hit on that, where if you do the right thing, really your choices become a lot simpler, and kind of the stress of weighing, should I go out, should I not go out, that's all eliminated when you do the right thing.
100%. And what I tell people, we all figure that out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
What West Point allows us to do is help our guys figure that out at a young age.
Man, that's exciting to just think about all these guys that just have this mindset that they're doing the right thing, they're disciplined, and you're around some incredible leaders. I mean, you're a great leader yourself, but you got to think about the guys you're rubbing elbows with from a military standpoint. These guys are cream of the crop to be able to teach there. What have you picked up from some of your peers that are either teaching or coaching there?
It's like all day, every day. And if you can learn something, about leadership, about influence, about impact every single day that you're here, something new. And a lot of it is just from observing the other people that you're around.
Mm-hmm.
We learn what it really means to support somebody, to hold them accountable, what it means to be able to lead somebody. And you do that, by being willing to go yourself. And so we will see, like yesterday, we had a tournament here.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over in the stands, and our superintendent is here. He's a 3-star general in the United States Army, a guy that's led hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and he's taken time out of his day to come watch a wrestling tournament. And why is he doing that? I think, one, he really appreciates a gladiator sport like wrestling. And another reason is he wants the cadets at West Point to see that he supports them. What better example of leadership than somebody, he's wearing 3 stars on his chest. He doesn't have to be at a wrestling tournament, but he shows up just to support the guys. That's one example. And but like I said, you can learn something every single day here that makes you a better leader and a better coach.
Man, that is so cool that he's there. And to your point, if I think of the model sport for West Point, what better sport than wrestling? I mean, that is like the rawest form of, hand-to-hand combat.
It fits, right? So around West Point, we hear often about the warrior ethos, that we try to instill in everybody that's here. What better example than the sport of wrestling?
Amen, man. And if we go way back to Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, back to your roots, man, how did this all start for you? Did you come from a wrestling or a coaching family?
I came from, I guess you could call it a wrestling family. So my dad wrestled in high school, but I think he graduated high school on a Saturday, and then he went to work on Monday. He didn't go to college. He wrestled through high school and played football, and then went to work and started raising a family. But my older brother, so he's a year and a half older than me, he started wrestling when I was 5 years old. So by default, I started wrestling as well. So I started when I was 5 and have been in it ever since. So I don't have like this story of, man, I remember when I started wrestling. Just as far back as I can remember, I was going to wrestling practice, with my older brother. So it's been part of my life since, from a very young age.
And were your parents married? Were they divorced? Like, were they real hard on you, or did they kind of let you do your own thing?
Yeah, do my own thing, and I've told this story, several times. But it came from a traditional family. I guess the one obvious wrinkle in it is my mother passed away when I was in 3rd grade. So I guess that was a shake up in our family dynamic. But even up to that point, 2 very supportive parents, even to this day. But I look back on it, and my dad was never hard on my brother or I in any of our sports. We ran cross country, played football, wrestling, several different things. But the one thing he was very, I mean, I remember to this day, very serious about was if you start something, you're going to finish. And I remember those conversations, whether it was wrestling, whether it was summer league baseball. Hey, if you're going to start this, you're going to finish it. But as far as like being in the corner yelling at us, I mean, there was never any of that. It was always just do your best. If you start, you're going to finish. No excuses, and try your best.
And the rest will take care of itself. And, you know, when you think about Tennessee, it's grown a lot in wrestling over the past 10 to 15 years in terms of just the numbers and some of the guys are putting out there. But did you always plan to go to Oklahoma State? And if not, where were you looking at coming out of high school? Because that's a power program to obviously to go right into.
I mean, I look back on it now. I just wanted to wrestle in college, to be honest with you. I knew that, and so growing up, I went to the Jay Robinson camp. I went to a couple camps at the University of Iowa. I went to camps around locally, and I just knew that I wanted to wrestle. I was watching the Brands brothers and in college and the Olympics, and watching Coach Smith John and Kel Sanders. I had the wrestling heroes that everybody my age had, and I knew I wanted to wrestle in college. Now, I didn't know where. I wanted to move away from home, so I didn't go to UT Chattanooga just because I wanted to move away from home and have some experiences outside of that area. But I was an under-recruited, wrestler, not because I should have been recruited, but just, I'm saying that I wasn't recruited by a lot of schools. I just happened to have a pretty decent senior nationals tournament my senior year, and Oklahoma State gave me a call. I was still uncommitted, like April of my senior year. And so when Oklahoma State called, I'd taken a few visits before then, but as soon as I visited, I was like, oh, wow, this is big-time wrestling. This is everything I've dreamed of as far as a place that's really serious about wrestling, where everybody is very serious about it and committed. And it just felt like a good fit for me. I'd always wanted that experience of being around a group of people that were as committed as I was.
And, man, you talk about a time to get to Oklahoma State when people are serious about it. You were, it looks like, a part of the 4 championship teams. Let me know if I'm wrong there.
No, that's right on. So my first year there, when I was redshirting, we had finished something like 7th, I think it was, at the NCAA tournament. And then the next 4 years, we were the team to beat and ran off 4 national titles in a row. Yeah, the next 4 years.
And that was right. So I grew up in Western Illinois, an hour from University of Iowa. So I'm a huge Hawkeye fan. Growing up, but right when I was in kind of like early high school and really started to pay attention to the D1 scene, Oklahoma State was winning, and of course I had the John Smith shoes, and I just was obsessed with John Smith, and so those programs are just lights out. You had Pendleton, Hendricks, and then of course when Mark Perry and Hendricks wrestled, I thought that was unbelievable. So you were a part of all that. I mean, it's, again, really tough to say, but is there any story or lesson that you think back to where you say, that was pretty significant for me, whether it was a match or whether it was a story with Coach Smith or anything like that really sticks with you to this day?
Man, I think that's a fantastic question. The honest answer is there are so many things. But if I had to put my finger on one thing, I would say what you really learn there, you have the obvious piece of world-class technique and being able to be taught in the sport technically by one of the best minds and the best technicians to ever compete. So that's an obvious, kind of advantage, is you learn the sport at a technical level as well as you could anywhere in the world. But even bigger than that, I think in hindsight, looking back, what I really learned is just the amount of work and expectation, the amount of commitment that it takes to sustain a program at that level. I look back at Coach Smith, and his attitude was just never, ever satisfied, ever. And it was just this relentless pursuit of knowing that you can be better and always being measured by the expectations of the program, which are to be the very best. So that sounds maybe like it's easy to do, but in reality, that's really hard work to keep that standard and to never lower it no matter what. I think being a part of those teams and seeing how much we were challenged day in and day out. We were the best team in the country for 4 years, but there wasn't a day that went by that we weren't challenged on that, whether it was from competition with our opponents or whether it was in the wrestling room, with our teammates and the coaching staff. Just the amount of work to keep that expectation as high as it is, I think, is something that has really helped me, in my coaching career, understand how much work it takes to have a good program.
And was the expectation on the outcome of the match or the things you're putting into it day in and day out?
Both.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Winning is important. And sometimes you would feel like it is the most important thing. Now, in hindsight, you realize that maybe winning isn't the most important thing in the world, but, make no mistake, there's a ton of pressure to win in a program like that. Winning is important. Being second is unacceptable. So, the expectation and the pressure to win, that was there. And then you try to balance it out, of course, with understanding that, if you focus on putting in the work, that's going to allow you to be successful in the end. But the answer to your question is both. There's a high level of pressure or expectation. You can call it pressure if you want. It's just an expectation to put in the work to allow yourself to be the very best.
Well, and especially when you've already won 2, and the amount of 3-time team champs in a row, let alone 4, is so rare. I mean, that's to me when it's really fascinating to look at a dynasty like the Bulls or the Lakers, where Phil Jackson was a part of both of those. But when you start winning consecutively like that, and you have to find new ways to motivate you and get yourself going because you've already won, that's when it's really fascinating to me. And you saw that firsthand. So, I mean, what a lesson in coaching you had during your time there. So, not to mention your time as a competitor.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I can only speak for myself, but I didn't recognize, and I certainly didn't appreciate it at the time as much as I do now. Maybe a more mature outlook, certainly more experience, now as being a head coach for the past decade of, now I really appreciate the things that I didn't even know I was learning at the time. But now I realize what I learned and certainly have a new appreciation for it.
I can only imagine it's kind of like that saying, when you have a kid, you finally start to think back to all the things you're grateful your parents did for you because you don't really realize it until you have a kid. And so when you're the head coach of a D1 program, I'm sure there's some parallels there.
Yeah, and I tell you what, man, it's so funny. When I first started coaching, so I was a grad assistant, which at Oklahoma State, means you pretty much wrestle every day. I wasn't involved in the office. I wasn't doing like intern type work. I was taking the graduate school classes and wrestling. So my first real coaching job outside of that, I was a head coach, and at Washita Baptist, and I would find myself at times, I would say some things, I'd be like, it sounds just like John, or I'd be like, what would John say in this situation, and so even though I didn't realize it when I was going through it, how much I was going to rely on those experiences to kind of help shape my coaching career, that's really funny because, you hear kids say, like, once you start having kids, you open your mouth and your dad speaks, like, man, I'm saying just what my dad said. I did the same thing in my coaching. I would say something, man, that sounded just like John Smith. Too funny.
So when did you decide you wanted to be a coach? Because, going into your last year or two, are you thinking, hey, time to get a job, or did you know the whole time you wanted to be a coach?
I didn't know. I didn't know either. So, oh man, I was so lucky the way that it worked out. I had always thought growing up that wrestling was going to be my future. But by the time I finished up, my 5th year, I was thinking, wrestling's really been the driving force of every decision I've ever made in my life. Really revolved around my goals in wrestling, like down to, like what I would or wouldn't do in my free time. The discipline there, where I went to school, every major decision I had made up until that point when I was 23 years old had been driven by the sport of wrestling. So I kind of thought I want to take a step back and try some other things. And I did for a few years, worked a couple different jobs before ultimately I decided that, wrestling is more than a sport to me. I missed really I missed the daily pursuit of a goal more than anything else. Going to work in an office, although there were goals that day, it wasn't the same. I couldn't feel the daily progress and work towards a goal. So I would say once I stepped away from the sport when I was, 24 to 27 years old, really reignited my passion for it and helped me understand that, to me personally, wrestling wasn't just a sport. It was something that gave me a little bit more meaning, or allowed me, to feel a little bit more alive the more I was involved in it.
So you coached, you were a GA, and then you went away from it totally and weren't involved in any program, and then went back to be a head coach. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I'm so lucky. It's like not many people can step away and then get back involved in the sport, especially as a head coach. And I did, at the NCAA Division II level. My first real job in wrestling was the head coach at Washita Baptist, and it was, a program that probably nobody else wanted that job, to be honest with you. It was a program that didn't exist yet. It was going to be the first year of the program. I mean, there was nothing at Washita except, the announcement that wrestling was going to start. And so I was the first ever coach of the program, and for me, I was just so desperate to get a wrestling coaching job at that time. And the timing of my life, I wasn't married yet, there wasn't a lot of strings. I could just pick up and move. And so I was really lucky the way that it worked out.
Man, it's just crazy to me. And I was going to ask you what the conversation was like with your wife, because it's like, hey, I haven't been involved with wrestling for a couple of years. Maybe she's thinking, that's a chapter that's closed, and then here you come on as a head coach, but you were single at that time. Okay.
Well, yeah, my wife, we've been married for almost 10 years now. We were dating then, and I still remember the conversation. It was, I really wanted to take the job, but I knew that Hannah and I were serious, and that, her opinion was going to have an influence on my decision. And I remember, and I was like, hey, I got to talk to you about something. And she got really scared, They were nervous, not knowing what to expect. And I said, I really am considering this job. And without hesitation, she said, you should take it. And so that made my mind up for me, right then. When she said that, I was, okay, I'm going to do it. So, yeah, we weren't married at the time. We knew we were serious. No one, I guess could have predicted where we would be today. But when she said, yeah, you should definitely do it, that helped the decision, made it a lot easier for me.
No question. And then you get to this program, which, by the way, this school needs to seriously consider a respelling of the name. I can't believe that you pronounce Washita out of what I'm looking at here on my note card. What's the meaning behind that, real quick?
So yeah, that's really interesting, man. I haven't told this story in 6 years since I've been there, but if I understand right, if I remember correctly, it's the French spelling of an Indian name. So that's why I tell people, don't even try to look at the word, just say Washita. But it's a small school in southwestern Arkansas in a small town. Yeah, man, it was, I knew they were starting wrestling, and I got a phone call saying they were looking for a coach, and ended up working out. So, nobody would have thought when I was leaving Oklahoma State I'd end up coaching at Washita Baptist. But as fate would have it, it worked out really well for me.
And it seems like there's a little movement of wrestling going on in Arkansas right now. Isn't there a D1 program, Little Rock? Is that this year or next year they're going live?
No, they're wrestling right now. They've already wrestled a tournament, yeah, and they got a dual meet coming up. But yeah, University of Arkansas Little Rock is a Division I program there. So, yeah, it was interesting. I was kind of on the leading edge of the college wrestling growth in Arkansas with that Division II program, and glad to see that it's taken off in the state even more.
That's unreal. I had no idea that they had that many programs, let alone any. To be honest with you, until I heard that the Little Rock program coming around this year or last year, I think I first heard of it. But
yeah, no, I know it's, but it's exciting for us in the wrestling world to see that, because you would think, Arkansas, it doesn't, resonate wrestling to you. But if you look where it's at, I mean, you're right next to Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, and wrestling is growing in the South, and Tennessee and Georgia. So, it does make sense. I'm good friends with the coaching staff there at Little Rock. I think they're going to crush it. They're really good guys that work really hard. So we're excited for them. But, man, it was, those first days starting that program. That was, that was an interesting time.
Let's get into that. So, anytime you take a new job, it's, you're really excited. You're shaking hands, taking pictures. And then day one, you get to your office and you're all alone. Did you ever have any hesitations or any doubts that, man, this might have been maybe this wasn't for me, or maybe this was a mistake? I mean, take us to some of those moments where you had some self-reflection like that when you first got there.
How much time do you have? Let me tell you, this is so I accepted the job, and then I show up 2 weeks later, something like that. I was finishing up my the current position I had at a job in Oklahoma City, so I gave them 2 weeks notice, and then I picked up and moved to Arkansas. So they had 2 weeks to get ready for me. They knew I was coming, but I show up. The day I show up, they start cleaning out my quote unquote office. And it is full of like old VHS tapes of basketball games, and it was like a storage room. And I'm like, okay, well, they knew for 2 weeks I was coming, and they just started cleaning out this storage room today to make it my office. But if that gives you an idea, I mean, I knew right then, okay, I'm up for some challenges here. I mean, my office really for the first month or so I was there was like the campus Starbucks, and that was legit my office. It's where I worked out of. And that was just indicative of the challenges I was going to face. Did I ever question it? Yes, I did. I never questioned whether I could do it. To be just candid with you, I got extremely frustrated there at the beginning of, well, why didn't you tell me this kind of deal? That's not what you told me a month ago. You're telling me something different now. And I was really close to maybe changing my mind there. Just in hindsight, I'm so glad that I didn't. I'm so glad I stuck it out. I was probably an absolute pain in the butt, as a new employee, because I'm coming in with all this fire and just full of piss and vinegar, ready to conquer the world. And I didn't get to know the culture of the campus and the community before I, was ready to just, like a wrecking ball, just get going. So, yeah, it was interesting, and I did question whether it was the right decision at times. Fortunately, I stuck with it, and I had some really supportive people around me that helped me stick with it. I guess the most important part of it was I was lucky enough to have an awesome group of guys on the team that, they made the job. The guys I coached every day were by far and away the best part of the job. So once they got on campus, it got a lot easier to enjoy the challenges a little bit more.
I was going to say, did you start at the fall time and you had a team, or you started in the spring and got to recruit?
I started April 1st, 2010.
Okay.
Was my first day. We competed in November 2010. So, yeah, do the math.
Wow.
6 months later, we're wrestling. So when I started, they gave me a list from admissions. Hey, here is all these kids that have called the admissions office or have applied and mentioned the word wrestling. Here's your list, go. And I'm like, what do I do with this? Recruit them. We want them here. Go recruit them. And so, I was making recruiting phone calls for the first time in my life, and recruiting kids to come wrestle there. There were a couple weeks I didn't even go to campus. I just had a car, and I was driving around the state of Oklahoma, sitting in living rooms or meeting in restaurants and talking about the program that we wanted to build. We had a team. That first year we had, I think, 21 guys on the team right out of the gate.
Man, those are some lonely car rides, on like a Monday afternoon. You just come out of a lunch, doesn't go your way. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm in outside sales. And so I can kind of put myself there mentally where you were at, it's like.
That's exactly, that's the job.
Yeah.
You're in sales.
Yeah.
I'm selling a different product, but that's exactly right.
But it's like some days it goes so well, and then other days it's like, man, what the heck just happened there? But the thing about your position that's interesting is that you had no one to really go to who had done it before. It's not like when you were a GA at Oklahoma State, you were on the recruiting road with Coach Smith. It sounds like you were just wrestling, so you really didn't have a lot to base that on. That's pretty incredible that you guys just had the success you did, and you were Coach of the Year at the D2 level. I mean, before you know it, it's like unbelievable.
Well, when you look back, it's true that I didn't have the experiences on staff at Oklahoma State, but what I did have is a really good group of friends and mentors that I could call. What should I do here? And just sounding boards, of people that, a couple of my friends are I would consider them friends or mentors or some of the best salesmen, that I've ever met. And just bouncing ideas off of them, it helped me, and I certainly grew a lot, professionally, just trying to figure that out. But let me tell you, the long days in the recruiting, and some days are great and some days you're scratching your head, that hasn't changed. It's the same way now as it was 10 years ago. We still have those days.
Well, it's because, when you got to Army, they they hadn't beaten Navy in, I can't remember the streak, I read it this morning, but quite a long time, and you were kind of starting from, not from scratch, but also rebuilding a program. Talk to us a little bit, just before we let you go here, but talk to us a little bit about the CEO type of the job. So not the 4 hours a day that you're coaching, or that you're recruiting, however much time that is. Like, what about the fundraising and the administration stuff? I mean, how much goes on behind the scenes that the fans really just don't see?
It's amazing, how many times, especially at Washita, I was asked, so do you teach? Do you teach any classes? Or nope, just, that's all you do. You just coach, huh? And I still maybe get asked that today, and I say, you know what, believe it or not, it's a full-time job. So, there's a lot that goes on, if you want to say, behind the scenes. Whether you call it a CEO coach or not, it's just the bottom line is the program is a lot bigger than just running practice in the mornings or the afternoons. And, as the head coach, you cast a shadow on the program that kind of helps shape the behaviors that are in here. So you have to always be aware of that. And for me personally, it's, there's not a day that goes by that's not on my mind almost 24 hours a day. And, maybe I try to turn it off when I get home and see the wife and kids, but I'm constantly thinking about my job for a couple of reasons. I love it, and I enjoy thinking about it, and I owe it to the guys on the team to constantly be thinking about how we can get better. But, yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. The most important thing, without a doubt, are our relationships with the student athlete. So putting that above and beyond everything else, I think, is super important. I tell younger coaches or my assistant coaches, listen, you're not going to get fired if you fill out some paperwork the wrong way. Like, you're going to get fired if you fail as a leader. You're going to get fired if you make terrible decisions. So don't let the work get in the way of what is really the job. And the job is to help motivate and train and inspire and equip these young guys to be able to achieve their goals. That's the most important thing. Other things around the program, the fundraising, super important. The relationship with your administration, extremely important. Almost maybe as important as your relationship with your athletes. But at the end of the day, we are here to, like I said, train and motivate and inspire these guys to achieve their goals. So I just try to operate under the lens, of having, their best outcomes in mind at all times.
Yeah, that makes sense because, it's easy to get distracted with something as minute as zeroing out your inbox or whatever, right? But to your point, the main thing is the relationship with the athletes. And if you do that, kind of the rest will take care of itself versus getting caught up in the day-to-day.
That's it. It's like my job isn't to be a professional administrator. My job is to be a head wrestling coach. And if that means I'm looking at my inbox right now that says I have 102 unread emails, which it does right now, it means that I'm going to not return some of them. That's the bottom line. Right. But I'm not going to try to be the best administrator at the expense of being the best coach.
Right. And Coach, as we wind down here, I haven't done this in about probably 50 episodes or so, but I do have 3 rapid-fire questions that are more quick-hitting just because I couldn't find a way to fit them in here. So the first one is, how does a college coach decide which open tournaments to go to?
I try to do as few of them as possible. I think the open tournament is one of the worst things in college sports, definitely in college wrestling, so I try to pick and choose as few of them as I can put on my schedule.
So do you put like the Southern Scuffle in that group, or is that a different type of tournament for you?
Well, technically it's an open because you see unattached guys and red shirts in it. So, I would say that's probably a little bit different though because it's a well-marketed, kind of high-profile event.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I try to get the most bang for the buck. I'm not talking dollars here. I'm talking about time. I'm talking about let's get the most quality, best matches that we can get in the most efficient way possible. Open tournaments where anybody can enter and the brackets may be 40 people, you end up having to forfeit some matches because, people are getting hurt or you've reached your match limit. There's absolutely no atmosphere to it at all. It's just for me, I think they're silly. I don't think they help grow our sport in any way. So I try to do as few of the true open tournaments as possible.
They're depressing to be at, even for someone who loves wrestling. I go there, and a couple hours in, you're like, "What the heck is this?" The energy or the atmosphere. You nailed it right there. Second question is, how big? So I'm an outsider, so I don't know this, but how freaking big is the Army-Navy rivalry when you're at one of those 2 institutions?
You have no idea. Oh man, it's incredible and it's exciting. So what it is, it's an institutional rivalry. It's not, football versus football. It's not wrestling versus wrestling. It's one place versus another.
Mm-hmm.
You being from Illinois, think about, Illinois versus Oklahoma State in wrestling. That's 2 teams versus one another. Anything that the academies do, it's 2 entire schools versus the other. At whatever sport, no matter what they're ranked. I've learned that it's just something you have to embrace. That at first glance, that may seem, odd to some people to put so much emphasis on one single competition. But the reality of it is it means a lot to a lot of people. So we have to embrace it. And I think that we're fortunate to be part of a rivalry that people actually care about. Not many wrestling programs get to say that year in and year out, they're going to wrestle in a match that a lot of people truly care about. So that's a fun thing for us to be able to be a part of.
Yeah, totally. It's like, the Iowa-Oklahoma State was always big, but to your point, the Army-Navy is just, it's huge. And I got to think that you might get more credit for beating Navy than you would if you won like the EIWAs or something like that. It's that big.
In some people's eyes, probably that's certainly true. And, for me personally, it's we want to set our sights on championships. But when that week rolls around, when that's our opponent that weekend, it's extremely important to us. And then, it's turn around and let's focus on the postseason.
Exactly. And, Coach, last one for you. We always ask every guest we have this question, but how did wrestling change your life, or what life lessons do you still operate with today that you got from your days back in the singlet, back on the mat?
So I'm fortunate that I get to make a living in the sport of wrestling. So, I think it's what, I said earlier is that I'm going to always consider myself a wrestler. I can't wrestle anymore, certainly not like I used to, but I'm going to always be a wrestler. I don't think, since I started at such a young age, I don't think wrestling, I wouldn't say it changed my life. I would say it shaped my life. And, the people that I've been around through the sport are really what's shaped my life. So what wrestling did for me was put me around some really incredible role models, some mentors and positive influences in my life, that taught me the true lessons that are worth learning, about hard work, humility, about how to win, with grace, and about how to lose without excuses. It's hard for me to separate my life without wrestling and my life with it because it's always been a part. So I'd say it shaped my life and my attitude, and then, in return has helped me do the same thing for a lot of other people. I think I mean, there's no question I owe wrestling, an entire debt of gratitude for what I've learned through the sport.
And to your point, you think about the people you got to bump elbows with. I mean, what other sport could you go and spend 5 years with a 6-time world champion like you got to, or be able to hang out with maybe not hang out, but work with a 3-star general? I mean, it's just incredible that all came from a sport, and a lot of people miss that when they think about it, just in terms of the pure competition standpoint.
I think that's what I was missing when I stepped away from the sport, is I saw it as, competition and an athletic endeavor. When I stepped away, I realized how much it really did mean, to not just compete, but, the way that it affected what I was doing day to day, how much the sport really meant to me in so many ways. So, yeah, there's no question. I think that the people that wrestling has given me access to, if you want to say it that way, has been, the most beneficial thing that it's done for me.
Well, as you said, I mean, someone like you with your coaching pedigree, I know you're doing that for your guys. So, Coach, really appreciate you taking some time for us. You have some fans here in Illinois, man. I loved following the program, and honored to have you on. Wish you the best of luck this year, and thank you again, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And all great things must come to an end. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, give us a review, give us a rating, and share this with your friends. It would mean the world to us. Thanks for listening to Wrestling Changed My Life.